In this video, we will learn how to create a pivot chart. Pivot charts are graphical representation of a pivot table. If you know about what pivot tables are and how to use them, you can continue with this lecture. If you do not know about pivot tables, the next lecture in this series is about pivot tables. That lecture was part of our another course on Microsoft Excel. We have included it here so that you can learn about pivot tables. If you want to learn more about other such features of Microsoft Excel, you can enroll in our another course of Excel Masterclass. So pivot tables basically summarize the data in the form of rows and columns and gives the corresponding counts and sums of different combination of categories. So for example, in this table I have data of furniture sales. The first column is giving me the salesperson. The next column tells me what product that salesperson sold. Next column is which region does that salesperson belong. Then we get the name of the customer. Then is the date of sale. Then we have the item cost. Then we have the number of items sold, and then we have the total cost. So I have all these transactions. So every salesperson, whenever he's selling any particular product, that transaction is noted down into this table. If I want to get the total number of chairs sold by salesperson 12, I can do that by using these filters. And setting that as salesperson 12, and then I can add the total cost or the number of items, whichever I want, to get the total number of chairs sold by a salesperson. So this is a very lengthy process. Also, if I want to compare the chair sales by each individual salesperson, that becomes even more lengthy. This is where summarizing the data using a pivot table helps us. So in the next sheet, you can see on the left is a pivot table which can summarize the data as I want it to be. Corresponding to this table, I can draw a corresponding pivot chart. So as you can see, since I had row labels on the left, these row labels are coming as the horizontal axis labels in this chart. These two series, that is the two names of our customers, is the two series plotted here, and on the y-axis I am getting the value of total cost for each customer. Apart from that, I have added a filter which is for region, although I have not selected any region. Same is depicted in this graph. There is a filter of region, but there is no particular region selected. So as you can see, the difference between a normal bar graph and a pivot bar graph is that you get all these options of filter, of choosing the required axis labels, and choosing the required categories or data series. You can see right now I have only two customers. I can choose another one like home space here, and we will get 3 data series now. If I want to have a graph of all the months, I'll get a graph of all the months here. If we want to apply a filter on region, we can select this Northeast region and then click on OK to get the values for Northeast region only. A point to note here is whatever change we do in this chart is reflected in this table. That is, when I included other months, those other months data values is shown here. Similarly, if I change anything in the table, it will be reflected in the chart. So if I am removing January and Feb from this table, that will be removed from this chart also. So there is a two-way link between a pivot table and a pivot chart. However, if you delete this pivot table, it will not delete this chart. This chart has its own individual identity. It will still continue to exist with all these filter options still remaining. Also note that there is an option of creating slicers, which probably you would be knowing. If you do not know, refer to that other video that I told you about earlier. So if you have slicers here, for example, if I add a slicer for region and I have Northeast selected here, if I click on Northwest, this table and this chart both will show the data for Northwest. That is, a slicer will work for both the table and the chart. So let us now learn how to create this chart when we have this pivot table. Click anywhere on the pivot table and go to insert and click on pivot chart. So here you will get all the options. The first one is a clustered column chart, which is what we drew. If you want to draw any other chart, you can select that also. And this is the pivot chart that we had with all the different filtering options. So if your data has a lot of cuts and you would like to show different scenarios or combinations of data series and categories in your presentation, maybe creating 10 or 12 different charts will not help. Creating this one pivot chart and using its filters to show all those while presenting may be a better option. So it's a very strong chart. Whenever you are summarizing the data using a pivot table, you can always use a pivot chart along with it to graphically represent the pivot table data.